Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So as you know from the title of this video, today I am going to be talking you through my favourite books that I read in 2021. I've got a list here on my phone and they're all somewhere in the bookshelf behind me, but I thought it would be easier if I just put little images up there for what the book looks like so you guys can get a glimpse into the cover. But anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so I worked out I've got 14 recommendations from what I read last year, and a bunch of them are series and then a couple are just standalones. So we'll make our way through it. The first book that I recommend that I read last year was Red, White and Royal Blue. This book is hugely popular. I'm pretty sure it's classified as YA. It's a romance and it's set in primarily America, also a bit set in Britain. It's basically just a gay romance between the son of the President of America and the Prince of, I think, Wales or something. But yeah, it's really good. It's pretty relaxing, casual. It's not like full on, which is nice, but it was a really enjoyable read and I liked that it was a standalone. So yeah, that was one of my favorite reads from the past year, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if romance is your thing. It's set during this time, so like now, which is a bit more contemporary than what I usually read, so that was a nice change. The next book, or rather series, that I loved from last year was the Selection series. I know this came out years and years ago, and most people my age have already read it. I was a bit slow to the mark. I did read the whole series last year and I really, really loved it. It was kind of light-hearted, which was nice. It wasn't like full on. Again, it was like a romance, a fantasy sort of romance. Yeah, it was really good. There's like a bit of a love triangle in it, which I'm not keen on. It was giving me like Hunger Games vibes with that. But overall, I liked it. There are 3 books in the series, and then there's like another mini-series spin-off after that with 2. I wasn't as keen on the spin-off series. I wouldn't really recommend it because it's a bit weird. It shows you like the characters from the first series when they're older and it changes them. So I wouldn't recommend reading the last 2 books, but the first 3 from the main series of the Selection are really good. And yeah, they're pretty short books. They're just light-hearted, not too intense, which is nice, and they're definitely YA. Okay, of course, the next series I'm recommending is Throne of Glass, which is my favourite series ever. Of course, I've read it before last year. It's just that last year I did take the time to reread the series, so I don't know if that counts or not, but I'm going to make it count in this list. But Throne of Glass is my favourite series ever. There are 8 books, so it's a bit of a commitment, but I'd say it's worthwhile. It's basically about this assassin who gets roped into this competition to get back her freedom after being a slave for a year. So it's really good. It's fantasy, YA, and as the series goes on, it just gets better and better and better and better. Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. I've convinced most of my friends to read it, so if that doesn't convince you to read Throne of Glass, then I don't know what will, but it's so good. But yeah, definitely obsessed with it. Would recommend. The next one is another series. A lot of these are series actually, but the Folk of the Air series. So this includes, you've probably heard of The Cruel Prince and then the other books in the series. There are 3 books that make up the Folk of the Air series and I really love it. It's really, like, it's quite fantasy, it's YA fantasy, but like it's quite whimsical and stuff. So it's more, like at first I was kind of like because there's so much fairy stuff. It seems almost like it should be like a little kiddish in a way, but it's really, really good. And I love the main character, Jude. She's amazing. She's really like strong and sort of power hungry and stuff, which I find really interesting, and her character just develops so well. And she's really clever, so I love that. Yeah, would recommend the Folk of the Air series. The books aren't too long. It's only 3 books, so it's not like a super big commitment. The next one is the Serpent and Dove series. I read all of that series last year pretty much, and the final book has come out of the series, so you don't have to wait anymore. There are 3 books. The first one is really good, second one is meh, and then the third one's really good. So overall, I think it's worthwhile reading them. It's basically about a witch, and she's like being hunted and stuff, and she falls in love with a witch hunter essentially. Well, they like put in a forced marriage, but it's really, really good. And the plot really advances as the series goes on, like a lot more things are uncovered. So yeah, it's quite good. It's definitely, again, YA fantasy. If you can't tell, those are my favorite type, my favorite genre of books. And it's set in essentially France, kind of. I don't know. It's like I think it's a made up place, but with like obvious French influence. And set in medieval times, but it's so good. Okay, the next book is actually a standalone, and that's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I love. I read it last year after I saw it all over Instagram, so I gave it a shot and it's really good. This is an adult book, I think, and you can tell because it's like a bit more slower paced compared to YA. Yeah, and it's really good. It's basically about this woman, Addie, who in like the long ago, like, I don't know, 500 years ago or something, makes a deal with essentially the devil so that she can live forever, but no one ever remembers who she is. And it's really cool, and it just goes on like about her life and her experiences, and they're constant, like it'll show the present time when she's in New York City and then do flashbacks to when she was like a child and a young adult in France. And I really love it. It's really good, but it's quite a big book. And also by the same author, V. Schwab, I think that's how you pronounce her name. I read The Near Witch, which was actually the first book she's ever released, and I really liked it. It was much more light-hearted than The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It was YA, so it's quite, like, it's a smaller book, easier to read, less full-on, less of a commitment, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of her less popular, less well-known books, so it was nice to read that and get a bit more of a taste for V.E. Schwab. And again, it's set in like medieval France or something. There seems to be a bit of a theme there. And it's about this girl who's like in a country town, and kids in the town start disappearing at the same time that a witch moves into the town, and it's really good. Okay, the next book I'm recommending is Legend Born. I can't remember the author's name, it's like down there on my bookshelf somewhere, but it was really, really good. I wasn't sure if I'd like it. It's YA fantasy, I think. It's set in present time, and it's set with this girl who she moves to college essentially in America, and then she meets this whole society of like magic wielders and sort of gets involved in them. And I wasn't so sure about it because it's all like about King Arthur and Merlin and stuff, which was a bit like for me, you know, I'm not really into that, but it was really well done. It was really good. And also the book really opens your eye up to racism, I think, and I really liked that sort of aspect and like influence. So yeah, I really liked Legend Born, would recommend. That's part of a series, I'm pretty well, yeah, it's part of a series, but the other books haven't come out yet, so there's only one book out yet, so it's kind of annoying when you read the first book and the others aren't out and you have to wait years, so yeah, keep that in mind. The next book I'm recommending is Sorcery of Thorns. This one's a standalone, which I thought was really unusual, especially considering it's YA, young adult fantasy again, because usually they're part of a series. I feel like that's kind of the norm, but it's about this girl who's basically a sort of librarian, and she's in charge of looking after magical books, and she basically gets accused of murdering the head librarian, and she sort of teams up with this sorcerer to uncover the truth. So it's a bit like a mystery book kind of, but like it's YA fantasy as well. It was really nice. It was really different to other fantasy books, I think. It was a bit more original, less of like the normal typical themes, and I really like the characters. This one I feel like is good also for younger readers. Like the main character is 16 years old, so it's a good book for teens, I think. Okay, the next two books are both like murder, well not necessarily murder mystery, but just mystery books in general. So one is The Cousins, which I loved. I read that this year and it was a really interesting mystery book. It wasn't a murder mystery, which I think was a nice twist because often they are murder mysteries, and it was more lighthearted and contemporary, and overall I really loved it. And by the same author, I can't remember the author's name, but it'll be on the screen as I show the book covers anyway. I also read One of Us is Lying, which is a pretty well-known, iconic book. I didn't like it as much as The Cousins, but it was really good. It was a murder mystery. The one thing I didn't like is like it was centered in around a high school in America, and all the characters were really stereotypical, which I don't know, it was just like that's too stereotypical for me, so I wasn't into that. But I really liked the storyline, and I actually did like how the characters developed, and you really got to know them as it went on, because it was centered around like 5 characters I think, and you actually saw each of their perspectives, which was a really nice twist. Okay, so next is 2 series that are set like intertwined, and this is part of the Grishaverse, which probably most people know, but I read Shadow and Bone, which I loved. I'm like super obsessed with the Grishaverse now. I've fully been converted. I love Shadow and Bone. I love all the characters and the plot and everything. Alina is just amazing. I love her. The second book in the series isn't as good as the first and the third, but I love the series in general, and personally I prefer Shadow and Bone, that trilogy, to the other duologies within the Grishaverse. But then similarly, I'm also recommending Six of Crows, which is the duology that goes after Shadow and Bone. I don't know if any of this makes sense to people who aren't like already aware of the Grishaverse. It's kind of confusing, but there's a trilogy, Shadow and Bone, and then it follows up with a duology, which is Six of Crows, and I loved both of them. Six of Crows I thought was really clever and witty, which I really liked, and I liked how there were like 6 main characters and you really got to know them all and got like a glimpse into their perspective, which I think was really cool. Whereas the Shadow and Bone series was all like first person from Alina's perspective, but I loved both. You don't have to read Shadow and Bone to be able to read Six of Crows, but I would recommend it because it gives you like extra insight, and you see like all the sort of crossovers between them, which I personally really enjoyed. But yeah, those series are so good. I love the Grishaverse. I'm fully converted and obsessed. And the last book I'm recommending from what I read last year is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. It's the first book in a Crescent City series. The second book is coming out this year. So yeah, it's one of those ones where like you want to read the whole series, but there's only one book out. But I loved it. The characters are so good. Bryce is such a good character. It's very similar, like it's got sort of similar themes to Sarah J. Maas's other books, but rather than being young adult, it is classified as new adult, I think. And it's fantasy, which of course I love. I'm obviously obsessed with fantasy books, but I liked how it was set like in a modern city, which I feel like is unusual for fantasy. They're often kind of more medieval, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was so good, and there are so many good moments from that book. It was like full of adrenaline. I remember I read most of it over a few days, but then I had like half of the book left and I read it all in one night. I literally stayed up like all night just to read it because I got pulled in so thoroughly. It was just so good and the adrenaline was pumping. But anyway, would definitely recommend Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. Okay, so those are all my recommendations from the books I read last year. I read so many books last year, I don't even know the number I read, but a lot. But those were my top recommendations, and I would definitely reread all of them in a heartbeat. That was so good. Yeah, so let me know if you've read any. I would love to chat about the books in the comment section, of course. I love chatting about books. Also, let me know if you plan on reading any of these books this year, or if you have any of your own recommendations. I'd love to hear them. I'm always looking out for good recommendations. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this little video. I hope it inspires you to pick up a good book, and I'll see you guys in my next video. So until then, bye.